I always feel like I steal Brad's time every year, so I'll try to be quick and get him going. Brad Israel. Brad has been with us from the start. He had the privilege of calling him one of my best friends in my life since we were in kindergarten. We were talking about it last night, me and him and Charlie Dodson. I know Mark Delaney's here today, but yeah, that's just an example of 3 friends that I've had for over 4 decades that I cannot remember getting sideways with one time in my life. Like, can never remember having an altercation, being disappointed in one another, being let down, being lied to, none of that. And when you got friendships like that stay with you your whole life, that's pretty damn special. And outside of my family, that is the greatest gift I've ever been given, the friends that are in my life. But back to Brad. Brad and I kind of ran similar tracks, grew up together, played inside linebacker together. He went to Hampton-Sydney. I went to Alabama. We both were interested in the military. We toured the academies together in high school. And I think after 9/11, we 100% knew we both wanted to serve. I went in the Marine Corps. Brad chose the Army. He asked me why I wanted to go in the Marines. I said I wanted to go fight. I said, Brad, why do you want to go to the Army? He said, I just want to go do cool training and get some badges on my uniform. It'll be good for my resume later. Anyway. Brad's career was much more decorated than mine. He was higher ranked. He spent more time in service, a lot more accolades, much more accomplished than my brief time in the service. So I've got nothing but insane respect for him. But he worked with me for a few years at Battle Plan Capital and then I guess 68 Ventures. But his dream and passion was always doing what he's doing right now, which was transitioning out and being on the speaker circuit, being on the leadership and development and the coaching side. And Mark has been a mentor of his on that front as well. But Brad took a huge bet on himself, all right? For those of y'all that know Brad, Brad's pretty tight. Like, Brad doesn't like to take a lot of financial risk. I see John Therrell laughing back there. He grew up with us and knows Brad very well. Brad, memorized the number to my debit card so he could order pizzas off it in high school. That's who Brad was. So for Brad to leave a very, very good job that was very well paying and take a risk, for him, for his family, and for Anna, his loving wife, to support him in that, with Brad to say, I have no idea how this is going to work. There's no safety net. I have no customers. I'm going to have to be on the road traveling. I'm just going to have to figure this out. But he did it, and he has absolutely crushed it. Not only how he's performing financially and the things that he's able to do for his family, but how you watch him show up today and how professional and how polished and how he has honed his craft and invested in things like presidential leadership program or graduate degrees. He is a continual learner. And I always love having him up here because his style is so much different than mine. But I cannot tell you of a man that I have more love and more respect and more admiration for than my friend. His integrity is through the roof, and he always puts everybody else ahead of himself as long as it doesn't cost him any money. All right? One of my best friends for life, Brad Israel.
All right, good morning. It's good to be back for the 4th year. And one thing to clarify, I think it was my brother that knew Nathan's debit card number, but I probably benefited from eating more pizza. And another thing, we did go visit the service academies. Nathan could have and did get in. I did not. I was more of the crayon type, and so I ended up at Hampton-Sydney College, and I'll get into some of that story. But what I want to do first is really just share with you the belief system that I've adopted over the years and how much the military experience and people have shaped me in the way that I see the world, especially through the lens of leadership. And as he mentioned, Mark Fernandez has been a wonderful mentor as I exited the service. And I know so many of you in the crowd that have had that dent on me in such a positive way too. The stories I'm going to share around this A4 framework are really in honor of the military, our law enforcement, our first responders, because I believe that we share this. And so I want to honor you with the messages, and for everybody else, for your benefit as well, because these things are what were poured into me. And I know they won't want to do it, but I would ask for our veterans and law enforcement. And would you please stand up real quick just so I can see who's in the room and get a quick recognition. I know you don't like to stand up, but it's important. It really is. So I'm going to take you back to 2005. I'm in a really dark place mentally. I'm angry at the world. I'm in the Ranger School Gulag, which is a prison-like work camp in the hot, mosquito-infested piney woods of Georgia. It's for recycles, which means that you didn't pass a phase of training and you get kicked back to the very beginning, and you will have the opportunity to start again when the next class begins, which for me was some 60 days away. You're isolated, alienated, you're embarrassed, you don't want to be there, you're taking your everyday orders from the Ranger instructors, and a lot of people end up just walking away. And I'm sitting there thinking, how in the world did I end up here? Well, I made a dumb choice. So on the land navigation course at the end of the first week, I turned on my red lens flashlight, thereby becoming a beacon of stupidity for the enemy to identify, and that'll get you kicked back because they don't want somebody like that that's going to make a choice doing something that ignorant to represent the Ranger tab. So after a few weeks, I muster up the courage. I've been listening to that loud negative voice in my head that you've heard Mark talk about in the years past. And it's gotten so loud that I decide I don't want the Ranger tab. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to schedule a meeting with the colonel and I'm going to quit. The only thing I've got to figure out is what excuse, what lie, to his point this morning, am I going to justify in my head so that I can tell my good friend and mentor, Johnny Craver, who, for whatever reason, had adopted me and a few other young, naive, civilian to soldier to officer candidates, and he had taken us under his wing. Johnny was a former Ranger instructor. He had competed in the best Ranger competition that's on the Discovery Channel every year. He, to me, was what I wanted to become. And on his weekends, he'd sacrifice time away from his family, his wife, Natalie, his 3 young children, his son right here, Kalen, who he called Bubba. And he'd go teach us how to set in the perfect ambush, what a special reconnaissance patrol was meant to achieve, how to navigate the Darby Mile obstacle course, but most importantly, what it meant to be an exceptional teammate and to put others in front of yourself when really all you wanted to do was get a little bit of sleep. So the day I have my meeting with the colonel, I'm walking across the Ranger camp and I can see the door to the Ranger headquarters building. And I've already got my story in my head of what I'm going to tell the colonel. I'm going to say I'm going to come back. I just want it to be on my terms. We had a good friend getting married. I didn't want to miss his wedding. I was half in, half out. And out of nowhere appears Johnny and Bubba from around the corner where the parking lot was, catch me dead in my tracks. I remember if I could have just melted into the concrete, that's what I would have done. I was so ashamed, so embarrassed. And him, just like Nathan, first thing he did was walk up and crack a joke and make fun of me for being recycled to break the ice. And we start walking and talking, and he's telling me about our buddies that are deployed all over the world now, about his upcoming deployment to Iraq. And then comes the question. He looks at me and he says, well, how are you really holding up? I sit there for a second. I say, Johnny, not good. I'm actually going to quit, but I promise you I'm going to come back. He looks at me with this piercing stare that I'm sure some of you have had people do in your life. They see right into your soul. And he says, Brad, no, you're not. And here's why. So there's guys with tabs, which is the Ranger tab you proudly wear on your left shoulder sleeve. It's your credibility badge. It's to show that you are willing to walk it, not just talk it. And he says, and then there's guys with stories. And the stories are the excuses for not finishing what you started when things got difficult, when it got hard, when you hit resistance. He said, I was an instructor here for quite a few years. I saw so many men come and go with the stories, and those are the lies that will haunt them for the rest of their life. He said, if you choose that, I promise you, it'll be one of your life's greatest regrets. That's all he says. We throw the football with his son. We talk a little bit more about their move to Texas. They give me a hug, and then they leave. I sit there and sulk because I know he is right. And I have to start looking in the mirror and owning my choices to determine the pathway for my life that I desire. So I don't go see the colonel that day, and instead I start to reflect on what I want to achieve. See, leadership starts with you, but it's not about you. It's about those that you're privileged enough to lead. And for every single one of us that's in here today that has a desire to chase greatness and to become a better version of ourselves, we have to look at it that way. It's not about us. It's what we can do for the benefit of others. That's what Ranger School is. It may equip you with leadership skills, but that's so that you can pour in to those that you're going to be responsible for. I think all too often we can screw that up, or we can start looking through the lens of self-interest or what's in it for me. And I'm so fortunate to have somebody like that to knock the sense into me and remind me of that understanding at a deeper level. So I go on to graduate class 0706, and I know some of you have seen this picture I've shared with you before. It's like, where's Waldo? When you look up, it's hard to find us. But the sobering reality that Mark brought up is from Abraham Maslow's work to the sum of 98, 99%. We'll never do the work necessary to pursue excellence as a leader, to chase that greatness as a leader. And I have it right on here. I thought I'd put a different percentage and I was going to make fun of myself, but I actually got it right. I was not a math guy. Nathan knows this. But so one thing when you think about this quote or when you think about this research, it's a very common story. And just be aware and you'll notice it in your life. But it's all too common where folks are not willing to recognize the discipline required in the sacrifices that you make. Because the discipline required in those sacrifices can get overpowered and overshadowed by the ease of the indulgence. All you have to do is look around. We've got weapons of mass distraction in our face. We've got screens to bury us and avoid reality. We can distance ourselves from the hard truths. But this is my truth. This is what I discover. And just like Mark and just like Will, I share it through the lens, as I said earlier, that these are things that have had a profound impact on me. And if any of it connects with you, then take it and use it and start exercising those muscles. But my truth is that you will not achieve true greatness as a leader without an extraordinary sense of belief in awareness, adaptability, adversity, and abundance, or as I refer to it as the A4 framework. They're your superpowers. And I invite you to embrace them with me. The first that we'll jump into, when I say awareness, I want you to think through the lens of self-awareness. And I'm going to take you to a moment in time where I'm sitting in a first class of the day on a fall morning. It's a psychology class. As we're starting to get into the material, a professor bursts in and yells at our instructor to cut the TV on. And right as we cut it on, we witness the second plane impacting the World Trade Center. And I know for anybody that's around my age or older, you know exactly where you were and what you were doing when this happened. It was a defining moment in all of our lives. And I remember reeling in my mind what is occurring real time before us. The next day, we were summoned by the leadership at Hampton-Sydney College to come hear our own State of the Union from the former president, General Sam Wilson. And General Sam was this noble giant. He was the youngest officer in the United States Army when he returned from World War II because everybody that outranked him had been killed. What had propelled him into the military, lied about his age at 16, was hearing Churchill's speech about we'll fight him in the streets, we'll fight him on the beaches, we'll never give in, we'll never surrender, so help me God. He went off the farm and into battle. And so I'm sitting there with my brother and some of our friends, and I'm listening to General Sam give us this wealth of information about Al-Qaeda, about bin Laden, about what the radical terrorist ideology was all about. And emotion overcame me, and when he was done speaking that morning, I went up and I found him and I said, General Sam, I want to go into the Army. What do you recommend? He, being the wise elder, looked at me and he said, son, this war's not going anywhere. He said, stay here and earn your degree, and if you're as convinced and passionate that you want to go serve in 2 short years, I'll be the first to write you a letter of recommendation. That's what I needed to hear. Part of my self-awareness journey, I can be a little impulsive. I can jump into things, and I need to spend some more time in my thought and reflect before I do that. So that's what I intended to do. And when I graduated, I went to thank General Sam out at his farm for the countless hours of mentorship that he had poured into me. And I asked him if there was anything else that he thought I should consider before I went in. He said, you recall a story I told you in my leadership and ethics class that fall, a story that his father shared with him. And it was about self-awareness. It was about a growth mindset. It was about humility. See, when General Sam returned from World War II as that youngest officer, the town of Rice, Virginia, they wanted to throw a parade and recognize their hometown hero. So the night before, General Sam recalls he had landed a date with the cutest girl in Southside Virginia, as he says. And he was down lacing up his boots, and his dad walks into his room, Jasper, and he says, Sammy, let me talk to you for a minute, son. And he knew when his dad said those words, he needed to stop what he was doing and lock on and make eye contact. And he said, son, your mom and I are so proud of you, and we thank God you made it home alive when so many others are mourning for the losses that they've experienced right now. He said, we know you're going to go on to achieve a life of extraordinary success and significance. And he said, but I want to tell you something, and I hope you hear it. He said, if you think you're green, you will continue to grow. But if you think you're ripe, you've already begun to rot. And General Sam said he sat there reflecting on those words from his father. And he honored it because that's the way he went on to live his entire life. Recognizing he never fully arrived and he never achieved that success without this extraordinary belief in continuous improvement, in having self-awareness, and the discipline that goes behind it. He went on to become a spy in the Soviet Union behind enemy lines in Moscow, stealing documents from Soviet officers. He was the 5th director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was deputy to the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. I could go on and on. Ranger Hall of Fame, Special Forces Hall of Fame, Merrill's Marauders. Extraordinary gift that we had, and his mentorship was transformative for me. And when you experience people in your life like this, it helps you set the trajectory for all that you desire to accomplish. And for my experiences now, and if you're thinking about this from, well, what does that mean for me? How can I do something like this? Understand, just like you heard this morning, at a deep level, who you are. Know what your habits are. Know the disciplines that are required behind them. Know how you behave. What's your attitude like? That's coming from those thoughts and that self-talk that you're feeding. That's going to impact how you interact with everybody that you care about, that you want to have influence over, that you connect with, that you lead. And what is that impact? Is it positive? Is it building confidence? Or is it negative? Is it detrimental? Is it destructive? Is it taken away from your team? You own that wake. Don't get so busy, so distracted, have so much activity going around you that you don't take that time to reflect and see where you are in that journey. And for us, every leader I work with, we start with Insights, which is the psychometric assessment that we believe in, that I was first introduced to from Nathan, from Mark. We used our version of it in the military. And it's a wonderful one to just be able to understand the communication, the impact, the relationships, all of it. And so as you start to go forward this year, how do you assess yourself from that lens of self-awareness? If you will choose courage over comfort and you'll work on the hard things that you need to work on, you will grow in that capacity, and then you really understand what A1 is all about. You understand what you need to do to unlock that potential to achieve greatness as a leader. And the second in the A4 framework is about adaptability. And when I say adaptability, I want you to think adaptability intelligence, because it's a skill set that can be strengthened over time. It's a learned skill. And I believe we would agree that we're not wired to be perfect. None of us are. We are wired to adapt. The world around us is changing rapidly, and we either are going to pivot, shift, make those choices that we need to be involved, or we're going to sit back passively and play the victim card and blame all the things that didn't happen and all the reasons why on somebody else or the situation or the environment. So when this really became prevalent for me, we're on a deployment. I'm in 7th Group with a team of Green Berets, a mountain detachment, and we're headed back to Badiai country, this time to southern Afghanistan. And we're going to be in the Kandahar province, but in the northern district. And for I know there's quite a few in the room that have been there, and for others to paint the picture, it's a brown tabletop desert, jagged, rocky terrain, random mountains that are soaring towards the skyline. The only greenery you see is on the valley floor near a water source. That's usually where the villages are, or they're on the sides of the mountain. It's desolate, it's dusty, it's pretty barren. Our mission this deployment is Village Stability Operations, or VSO is the popular acronym and themed new mission or flavor to when the war was called. And what it means is that we will live in the villages with the locals, no big walls, no big bases. We're completely entrenched in the culture. We're trying to alienate and isolate the enemy. We're trying to build trust and establish rapport with the locals. And the adaptability intelligence for my team, real time, was going to be critical for our mission success. We needed to learn all about the enemy in this area. We needed to learn who we could trust and who were the influential tribal leaders. We wanted to understand the terrain. We wanted to understand the history. So we do all these mental rehearsals and contingency planning to prepare us for this area that we were going. And about 3 weeks in, as we start to get our feet under us, we get a call from Special Operations Task Force South, Camp Brown, and they say, you got 72 hours, pack up all your equipment, you're getting a mission change, you're heading north to a denied territory known as Kundalin. Kundalin was home to one of the baddest bomb makers in northern Kandahar. His name was Tor John. His call sign on the radio was Pamir. He had been responsible for the deaths of dozens of U.S. and coalition forces, millions of dollars worth of weapons and vehicles and equipment, and we wanted to find him and we wanted to eliminate him. And as we're trying to get packed out and ready to move, we're having to do all of this planning to shift, to understand who he is, who his terrorist network cell was, what they stood for, because they were very effective at what they did, and then how we could start mapping it out and working our way in. And those shifts are going to happen all the time in the military. Right when you think you're getting into a flow, Murphy's Law kicks in, somebody gives you a mission change. If you're in training, an instructor throws it out there to derail you and to get in your head. And so in this case, we launched to Kundalin. On the way, we have this last route to get into the village on a valley floor, and we are moving methodically and intentionally because he has riddled it with bombs in the ground and in the rocks because he's wanted to isolate this village. We recover and reduce over 25 bombs that were found by our demolitions sergeants that are extraordinarily capable in what they do. And we get to the village and we think that we are going to be welcomed because we just opened up the routes back to Kandahar City. They can go get medical supplies or treatment. They can trade. They can go see family. They can do all these things, and nobody will even talk to us. They all shut their doors. They're scared for their lives because of this guy. So we sleep on the side of the mountain for the next 5 weeks in the elements. We get shot at, rocketed, mortared almost on a daily basis. And we get caught in a snowstorm and then a dust storm a few weeks later. Not familiar climates for us that are stationed down at Eglin Air Force Base. But the thing about Green Berets that will figure things out, they will do more with less, and they will start to think unconventionally, and they will be creative. And you see, we had 4 interpreters that are gainfully unemployed because nobody will talk to us. So we've just got to monitor in the radio traffic, listening to what the enemy's plotting against us. And we start noticing that the kids, just like anywhere in the world, they're mischievous, they're curious, they're hopeful, they're probing the wire. So we start interacting with the kids because the adults won't talk to us. To the point where we then use our interpreters to start teaching them classes. We've got a little mud kalat, as they call them, a little mud house on the side of the village, and that's where we would go down and we'd use the outside of that, and we'd set up with some of the local kids and one of the mullahs that saw what we were doing and wanted to be supportive. And we'd create this little classroom. And it started to grow where we had about 35 kids that were coming on a daily basis. And my intelligence sergeant said, you know what, let's map out who belongs to who. I said, well, how are we going to do that? He said, we're going to study, we'll observe from an overwatch position, we'll see where these kids go back, which mud kalat is theirs, because it was a maze, very dense, down in the middle of that valley floor. And he said, and then we'll see which one of their their fathers is going to what field because agriculture is their way of life. He said, so then we can start painting the picture. And we already knew who some of the influential tribal elders were. So that's what we did, and we ended up pinpointing this guy on the right, Hirajon. We noticed where his son went back to, and so one night, me and a couple of my guys and an interpreter went down into the village with discretion in the darkness, and we went and knocked on his door. And he came and answered it, still don't know why, risking his life. He ushered us to a guest house on the side of his mud kalot. He said he was going to make tea. He'd be right back. And I remember looking at my guys, I was like, he's either going to alert Pamir, he's going to go get a hand grenade and roll it in here, and we're going to be done. And thankfully, he didn't choose either of those. He came back, hands shaking, and he had the tea, and we sat and we spoke for the next few hours. We asked him questions about his family, about his tribe, about their history, about the challenges that they faced. We humanized ourselves in the moment so he didn't see us as these robotic soldiers that they needed to fear. We had wonderful conversation to the point where we recognized it was about to be the morning call to prayer, and we needed to get out of there before anybody saw us, and then reported him to Tour John. Before we left, we asked if we could come back. And he agreed. And so over the next few weeks, we went back probably a dozen times. And every time it grew larger and larger with the amount of men that were in that room, to the point where we could start meeting during the day. Because they decided, they made a choice that they no longer wanted to be pacified by this insurgent leader and his cronies. That was the moment that I knew that we could be successful in achieving our mission. The trust was now built. They saw us as we saw them. I started to recognize in my men more positivity, like you heard about earlier. They were engaging, they were laughing with the locals. We had this bond, we had some trust established with them. And all the while, it was infuriating Tour John. And then one day we get a call from one of the local police chiefs a few villages away. When he calls, all we can hear is gunfire. He says he's got Tour John pinned down and we needed to get there as soon as we could. So we hop on our side-by-sides with our gear and we go roaring towards the gunfire in the distance. And by the time we get there, Tour John and the other 4 from his network had already been killed by the Afghans, not by us. The village was in disbelief. There were tears of joy. They were so excited to be able to say that they could take ownership back. And the reflection point for me was none of that would have happened if my men did not embrace that adaptability intelligence to make the shift, to understand the capacity to do what was necessary, to think outside the box or unconventionally, to start to build relationships with folks that they probably didn't have a desire to do at the time. I watched them grow in this process. I certainly became better as a leader as well. So the action for you, what can you do to understand those mental rehearsals as you look at this year? To understand the contingency plans, write out what are the 3 variables that could derail your mission this year, and what do you need to think through in order to not let that occur? Or should it play out, just like things out of our control like COVID, have I done the work here so I don't panic, so I can lead through the storm and be effective and be where my feet are, and not listening to what I'm hearing on the radio or on the TV or anything else, but be true to who I am and my values. That's what these men did. And the success, it's built off of planning and rehearsing these things, rehearsing the moments before they actually occur. We would do pre-mortems and post-mortems before our missions. It's a business principle as well. What are the ways that this could fail, this project, and why? We get so married to our plans and our objectives that we can take it personally when somebody says, these are all the reasons that's not going to work, and here's why. So then you counter that with here are the things that we need to do. And then afterwards, because that's how we learn and grow, an after-action review is a post-mortem. What was supposed to happen? What were the facts and what really happened? What went well so we can share that with our teams? What didn't go so well so we can share that as well? And what are we going to do differently next time? That's part of your contingency planning as you look at your life, as you look at your personal life, as your professional life with your company or with those that you surround yourself with. And if you can embrace that, then you understand that component of adaptability intelligence and in the framework for making the most of your superpowers. A3 is about adversity. And when I talk about adversity, and you heard, and I loved Will's story about adversity, I look at it as adversity acceptance and adversity tolerance, building that muscle up where we're not going to quit. We're not going to just blame and play the victim violin. It's about the perspective gained through the struggle. It's about what we want to take away from that. I'm in Italy with the first unit that I served with, and it's my first training exercise coming up. It's an early morning in the fall. It's around 4 a.m. We're loading up all of our gear on the buses in Vicenza, Italy, to go to Grafenwehr, Germany. I get on the bus. I just met my platoon sergeant. I'm an infantry officer, a young second lieutenant. I got 35 of my teammates sitting behind me, most of whom I did not know yet. All of a sudden, I hear my name being yelled off the bus, so I run off. It's my commander, Captain McCrae. So I run over to him. I said, "Hey, sir, what's going on?" He said, "Brad, we got a message at the company headquarters that you need to call your father." He said, "There's an emergency." Sitting there thinking, an emergency? So I pull my cell phone out. I'm walking back to the bus, and I call my dad. I say, "Hey, Dad, what's going on? I just got a message. There's an emergency." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Johnny has been killed in Iraq." I remember hearing that, and I couldn't say anything. I told him I had to call him back because I had such a strong knot in my throat. Felt as if somebody was choking me out. Remember, I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, and I was isolated because I didn't have this great community of friends and loved ones around me. Johnny was leading his men in northern Baghdad when a roadside bomb went off, sending him 50 feet in the air, covering him in shrapnel, severing a limb so severely that they couldn't apply a tourniquet to save his life. He died in the arms of his brothers, knowing that that's where he was and could have final peace. But for me, I was in disbelief because Johnny was everything that I looked up to. He was too damn good to be killed like this. And I only knew Johnny for a very short period of my life. But I still talk about him to this day because of what he meant to me, going back to the story I shared with you. And one thing I learned through this experience and through all of our struggles, and we've all got our version of this, is that the way that you end that pain is not by compartmentalizing it and putting it on the shelf, because when other things pop up that are similar, it takes you right back to that spot. The way you end that pain is by working through the pain, by understanding what were the things that you could take away from those relationships, those experiences that are positive and productive, rather than negative, destructive, or detrimental. And so I give so much credit to him for helping me understand that, for helping me understand that I needed to reserve those emotions at that moment and be the leader my men needed me to be. I could hear his voice in my head saying that. So what pain are you avoiding? What do you need to understand, to work through? Who do you surround yourself with that can help you with that? Adversity will come for us all. Adversity is the advantage. There's a wonderful leadership guru by the name of Jim Rohn, and this quote speaks to me. Do not wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Wish you were stronger. Believe that you can be, and then start putting one foot in front of the other to make that happen. I wear the bracelet you see up there, and I know there's other veterans in the room that do the same, because we don't look at life, to Mark's point, that you're going to have bad days. We're all going to have bad days. But we're not going to go project that on anyone else, because I get to be here. We get to be here. We honor those that we lost by having purpose in what we do every single day. So what does that look like for you? When you hit resistance, when you hit interference, do you quickly shut down, or do you work through it? I've got a leader I work with out in Colorado, big organization. In Q4 this past year, they had $60 million in write-down on construction projects. Massive number. The easy thing to do would be to start firing everybody, to blame everybody, to point fingers, to destroy the culture. Instead, he's getting in shoulder to shoulder at all these different project sites across the country, going on his listening tour, taking total ownership of what's happened, and he's painted a replacement picture in his mind on what success is going to look like and what they need to do to achieve it. That's building that muscle of adversity and how you handle it. He's got a publicly traded company. There's a board that is down his neck, and he is the calm before the storm that he is in right now to navigate through those times. It is inspiring to witness and to be a part of, to be associated with. So think about the things that you need to do in that regard. Think about the adversity or the challenges that you might face or that you have, and how has it shaped your story? How has it become a part of your origin story? How can others benefit because you're able to have the perspective that you've gained through it? And don't look at what everybody else has gone through, because we all have our own unique stories, and we're not in the business of comparing it to somebody else's life's yardstick. It's only compared to our own. And as that muscle grows, you'll be in awe of where you will go and what you will become. And last, in the A4 framework that I believe ties it all together, is abundance. And when I say abundance, I want you to think the mindset, just like with stewardship, how is that tied together? And for me, where I really took notice to this, and I see it every day now with so much beautiful work that people in these communities in which we serve do. But I was in eastern Afghanistan. I was with my airborne rifle infantry platoon. We had gotten them all adopted by families. We were hitting this long 16-month deployment. We were building capacity and confidence, and we're getting into this great state of flow. I had an old crusty platoon sergeant that had been a mountain phase ranger instructor before, and Sergeant Adams and I were lock in step. It was going to be a rewarding deployment. And then I get a call from the battalion commander, and he's volunteering me to pack my bags, and I'm going to head to a different area. And I tried sir, I'm flattered, really appreciate the opportunity, but I really like to stay with my men because we've come so far. We went from one of the worst platoons in the battalion to one of the top rated. And he said, I don't think you heard me, Brad. He said, pack your bags. I got a Black Hawk inbound. And I said, yes, sir. So I hugged my guys, got to say my goodbyes, and I took off for Gamal, a different area. And the reason it was a sense of urgency is he had just fired the platoon leader before, because it turns out, and I know you'll be shocked to hear this, you should not put Javelin missiles on an Afghan locals transport truck, a jingle truck, and then lose accountability of it en route to a larger base. It's not a good look. So that's where I'm headed. As soon as I get there, it's not jiving. They had just lost one of the best leaders in that company, the first sergeant, and some other members of that company. And they were told they were the ash and trash of the battalion because we had stood up the heavy weapons company before the deployment. So much to the point where they began to believe it. And so I start trying to get to know these guys and understand more about them and who they are, what makes them tick. And I quickly recognized that they were not a bad team. They had weak leadership, but they had some phenomenal people. So as we started to do that work and rebuild their competencies, we had our first mail delivery since I got there. And Nathan was a part of this back in the day, and probably many others in the crowd, but we got all my men adopted from the last platoon, and all these families were pouring into them, sending them packages and letters and letting them know they cared about them and that they were praying for them. And then when I moved, a lot of these folks continued to send me stuff. So when you're looking at these pictures, like 90% of those packages were made out to me. And I can hear my guys kind of rumbling like, who the heck is this guy? What is all this? I was pretty embarrassed. And so I started opening them and throwing peanut butter and baby wipes and magazines and books and neck gaiters and socks to them. And I have to call my mom and tell her to kind of chill out. I was like, Mom, that was embarrassing. You can't be sending all this stuff. And she says, well, that's just not right. We're going to get them adopted too. Send me their names. Send me where they're from. Send me information. And for quite a few in the crowd that know my mom, she's a fierce mama warrior in her own right, and you give her a mission and you better watch out. And my wife Anna has a lot of that in her as well. And so the next thing you know, we start getting packages, but this time they're made out to my men, to Orlogio, to Castro, to Chafee, to Gaten Gardner. And you see these smiles on their faces, and they start to experience the relationships that we desired to have. Because when I got there, this team, they barely talked to each other. They'd bury their heads in gaming devices or a magazine, and there was no morale, there was no camaraderie. And so we started to build it to the point where eventually, months later, they came to me and they said, we've got so much stuff. What can we do for the locals? We see these kids walking around with no shoes on their feet in the middle of the snow. They're brushing their teeth with twigs. So we got dental offices to adopt us and send toothbrushes and toothpaste, and we started teaching them about basic hygiene so that they could live longer lives. And what I witnessed was how abundance can fuel leadership as well, about the shift that can take place when we start to recognize that everybody's got that potential, but nobody can lead from an empty vessel. We can't give what we don't have. So if your cup is full, find ways to pour into others. There is gratitude and there is opportunity that exists around all of us because we live in this country where abundance is plentiful. But it is a mindset shift, and it's one that you have to understand and embrace and start practicing in order to build that as one of your strongest muscles as well. So that's really where I wanted to get us to today. And what I encourage and I challenge you on is, what holds you back in your pursuit of excellence? I have the utmost belief that if you're intentional and you place the attention necessary to do the work required, you will have in life all that it is you desire. The relationships, the love, the abundance, however you define it. The A4 framework, it's your guide. As you get to know yourself, grow yourself, prove yourself, and ultimately, to give yourself. And when you're doing that and you're looking at where am I strongest, where can I do the most work, it's going to be awkward, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to want to retreat because that's what our minds tell us to keep us safe and to put walls up so we don't get embarrassed or we don't have that failure perception. But what I tell you is lean in and step into it, because that awkwardness, that uncomfortable feeling, that is an early indication of your growth and development in pursuit of mastery. It's our choices over our circumstances. Thank you for letting me share with you this morning.